first Indo-Pakistani War of 1947–48 did not put an end to the conflict between these two sides over Jammu and Kashmir. Following the war, India was in control of most of this princely state. Both sides violated the UN resolution which stopped the war in 1948. Pakistan did not withdraw its forces from Jammu and Kashmir, while India did not conduct a plebiscite as it promised. So in a way, the stage was set for another war, and it happened in 1965. Welcome to our video on the 1965 Indo-Pakistani War. Also, we've a reminder that just because governments split the world into rival regions, you don't have to deal with that on the internet thanks to our sponsor NordVPN, who we can give you a special deal with at nordvpn.com/kingsandgenerals. Governments and companies tend to limit what internet content is available to certain territories, and global tension and war only makes that more pronounced. From things like Netflix only streaming certain shows to certain places, to entire sites like YouTube being blocked, to governments actively censoring news, there is a lot of interference you can avoid if you use NordVPN on any and all of your devices. In one click, your virtual location is altered, giving you access to the internet as seen in another country, or if you're traveling, back to how things are at home. Except no more content blocks, higher prices, or censorship based on your location. All the while, Nord's threat protection features defend against the perils of internet browsing at all times, whether you use the VPN or not, and NordVPN also encrypts your activity with no logs kept, boosting your security and anonymity against all these groups trying to control and profit from your online life. Try it out today with 4 months of extra coverage added for free to a 2-year plan when you sign up at nordvpn.com/kingsandgenerals. They offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in giving it a go. That's nordvpn.com/kingsandgenerals. Following the partition of India and the First Kashmir War, both India and Pakistan went their own ways on the difficult path of state building. An important element of that was of course their foreign policy strategies. Pakistan was firmly in the Western camp. In 1954, Pakistan signed the Mutual Defense Assistance Agreement with the US, then joined the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization led by the United States and the Central Treaty Organization led by Britain. The United States supplied over $1 billion worth of weapons and equipment, including Patton tanks, F-86 Sabre jets, F-104 starfighters, M113 armored personnel carriers, and training to the Pakistani military, while Britain gave them Centurion tanks, Hawker Sea Fury aircraft, and other equipment. Meanwhile, India chose the path of non-alignment, which limited its capacity to modernize its army. The decisive Chinese victory in the 1962 war against India laid the poor state of the latter's army bare. This was a sort of wake-up call for India, which started to look for ways to strengthen its military. Remember, at the time, the relations between the Soviet Union and China were very bad, so pursuing closer relations with the Kremlin was a valid option for India. The USSR started supplying MiG-21 fighter jets, T-55 tanks, and air defense systems to India. And as Pakistan was getting closer with Beijing due to their mutual animosity towards India, the United States started providing limited military aid to New Delhi, including C-119 transport aircraft and artillery, while France supplied Ouragan and Mystère 4 fighter aircraft to India. The sides remained too far apart in their designs for Kashmir, which prevented any meaningful diplomacy to resolve the issue peacefully. India took steps to gradually incorporate Jammu and Kashmir, while Pakistan wanted to change the status quo. Meanwhile, the tensions were rising inside the state. In December 1963, an Islamic relic, a hair of the Prophet Muhammad, was stolen from Hazrat Bal Mosque in Srinagar, causing widespread riots. In April 1964, the Indian government released arguably the most popular Kashmiri politician, Sheikh Abdullah, from prison and sent him to Pakistan to seek a diplomatic solution to the conflict. The initiator of this mission, India's Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, died in May 1964, which meant that the last attempt to find a deal before the war erupted again was lost. At this point, the prevailing mood in Pakistan was that it was a now or never moment to take over Kashmir. They had a technological advantage, but they had to put it to use before India could establish military parity. They thought that the death of and succession to the only prime minister that independent India had ever had was going to cause trouble and instability in India. Moreover, they felt that the public sentiment in the Muslim-majority Jammu and Kashmir was decisively against India. In April 1965, they launched an offensive on the area called the Ran of Kutch and defeated the Indians in a series of battles. This small victory boosted the confidence of Pakistan to set their plan on Kashmir in motion. On August 5, 1965, thousands of Pakistani-trained irregular forces of the Kazad Kashmir Regiment crossed the ceasefire line and infiltrated the Indian-controlled areas on the way to the capital Srinagar, launching Operation Gibraltar. The Indian sources claim 30,000 to 40,000 militia participated in the operation, while the Pakistanis suggest a way more modest force of 5,000 to 7,000. The purpose of the operation was to incite rebellion among the Muslims of Kashmir and take control of key civilian and military infrastructure such as bridges, roads and airfields. But the Pakistani government clearly miscalculated. They thought that the riots of 1963 and the general discontent of the Muslims towards the state meant they could easily incite such a rebellion. But the plan failed, as no rebellion ensued, while several infiltrators were captured. The failure of the first part of the Pakistani plan allowed the Indian Army to capture the momentum. On August 15, 1965, the Indian Army crossed the ceasefire line and took the Pakistanis by surprise. They immediately captured several important mountain positions of the Pakistani army. The next target of the Indian Army was the Hajipir Pass, strategically located between Uri and Poonch, two sites of heavy battles of the First Indo-Pakistani War. On August 26, the Indian 1st Para Battalion stormed Sank under heavy artillery barrage, forcing the Pakistanis to withdraw. On the next day, the 68th Infantry Brigade advanced on the Hajipir Pass and engaged the Pakistanis. Remember, this was an extremely difficult terrain to conduct offensive operations, and the Indian commanders made another smart decision to catch the Pakistanis by surprise once again. The 68th Brigade left a platoon to fight the Pakistani forces and keep them busy, while the rest of the Indian Brigade climbed the pass from another place, managing to outflank the Pakistanis. This forced them to retreat. The Indians captured the Hajipir Pass, taking the Poonch-Uri road under their control, making their logistics between these two locales much shorter and putting the future operations of Pakistan in this area under grave threat. This was a major victory for India at the beginning of the war. Pakistan now needed to recapture the momentum lost early on in the war they started. Even though the first phase of the war, Operation Gibraltar, did not work out, the Pakistani government decided to move forward with the second phase of their war strategy, the occupation of Aknur, a key choke point in the south of the disputed Jammu and Kashmir state. On September 1st, the Pakistani army launched Operation Grand Slam for this purpose. Thousands of Pakistanis from the 12th Infantry Division and the 1st Armoured Division spearheaded the assault, achieving a 7 to 8 kilometer advance on the first day against a much smaller Indian force. More importantly, the Pakistani army had the US-provided Patton tanks, which were way more advanced than the Indian AMX-13 light tanks. Despite the early progress, Pakistan's President Ayub Khan made a questionable decision to replace the Pakistani commander, General Akhtar Ali Malik, with General Aga Muhammad Yahya Khan due to the failure of Operation Gibraltar and for political reasons on the second day of the operation. This created confusion in the Pakistani ranks, delaying their assault. It allowed the Indians to regroup and bring reinforcements. The 20th Lancers of the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force managed to stop the subsequent Pakistani advance, and when the Indian Army launched its own counter-offensive, the Pakistani command had to shift its focus to defense. On September 6th, the Indian Army started a major offensive on the internationally recognized territory of Pakistan, with its second biggest city, Lahore, as the key target. The purpose was to force the Pakistanis to divert their attention from attacking to defending, to capture Lahore, destroy as much military potential of Pakistan as possible, and force them to negotiate from a position of weakness. The Indian offensive was carried out along a wide front on three main axes. The northern axis from Amritsar to Lahore, spearheaded by the 15th Infantry Division, the central axis from Kalra to Baki, led by the 7th Infantry Division, and the southern Kemkaran Kasur axis, conducted by the 4th Mountain Division. These forces were supported by the Deccan Horse and the 1st Armoured Brigade, providing tanks and other armoured vehicles for the offensive. On the morning of September 6th, the 15th Infantry Division started the offensive and quickly reached the Ichagil Canal. The 3rd JAT Regiment advanced all the way to Batapur and Dograi on the outskirts of Lahore, but facing shortages of ammunition, logistical difficulties, and Pakistani shelling and airstrikes, they had to withdraw. However, the Indians were more successful in the Kalra sector. The 7th Infantry Division, supported by the 48th Brigade, overwhelmed the Pakistanis and captured a significant territory all the way to Berki, on the outskirts of Lahore. On September 8th, the Pakistani army conducted a massive artillery shelling on the Indian troops to slow them down, which was followed by a tank counterattack by the Pakistani 1st Armoured Division. The Indian infantry managed to slow them down before their tanks arrived and turned the tide of the battle. On September 11th, India captured Berki. Around the same time, Pakistan attempted an ambitious counteroffensive into India. The Pakistani 1st Armoured Division, which was the most powerful tank unit of the Pakistani army, advanced on Kemkaran, capturing it on September 8th. The Indian 4th Mountain Division, supported by several units of the 2nd Armoured Brigade, withdrew to Asalatar, hastily creating defensive lines in this area. Along with laying some mines, Indians also dug anti-tank trenches in sugarcane fields and flooded them, luring the Pakistani Patton tanks to this area. They got stuck in soft, marshy ground, becoming easy targets for the Indian artillery. Moreover, Indian Centurion and Sherman tanks were placed on the flanks of the Pakistani tanks, resulting in many of them destroyed in ambushes. The Battle of Assalutar was the biggest tank battle since World War II. Pakistan lost some 100 of its tanks, against some 30 lost by India. This was a massive success for India. Not only did this victory stop the Pakistani counteroffensive in this sector, it also destroyed a significant portion of the offensive potential of the Pakistani army. The Indian army once again went on the offensive. This time their target was Sialkot, a major rail and road junction connecting Pakistani Punjab to Kashmir. Capturing it would have complicated the logistics of the Pakistani war effort in Jammu and Kashmir, along with definitely forcing it to defend in this war, after initially envisaging it as an offensive war. On September 8th, the Indian Army, consisting of the 1st Armoured Division, 6th Mountain Division, and the 14th and 26th Infantry Divisions, crossed the border with Pakistan, launching an offensive on Sialkot. They forced the Pakistani 6th Armoured Division and the 24th Infantry Brigade to withdraw to Philora, which on September 10th became the site of the first major battle in this sector. The Battle of Philora was another big tank battle and another major victory for India. The Indians attacked the Pakistani positions from 3 directions, with the 1st Armoured Brigade conducting an assault from the north, the 17th Pune Horse Regiment and the 62nd Cavalry Regiment attacking from the west, while the 43rd Lorried Brigade cut off the potential Pakistani retreat from the east. The Indian assault was preceded by massive artillery shelling, which weakened the Pakistani defences. The assault of the 1st Armoured Brigade on the positions of the 11th Cavalry Regiment was the main one, and it succeeded. The 10th Cavalry Regiment and the 14th Para Brigade tried to counterattack, but neither them nor the Pakistani aviation managed to stop the capture of Philora. The Indian tank forces once again proved superior, as the Indian Centurion tanks outperformed the Pakistani Patton tanks, particularly in night fighting. The 6th Armoured Division of Pakistan and other defending forces had to withdraw to Chawinda, bracing for another Indian assault. The Pakistani command sent the 8th Infantry Division and elements of the 1st Armoured Division to bolster the defences. On September 14th, the Indian attack started. Their tanks tried to outflank Pakistani positions, but the determined counterattack by the 25th Cavalry Regiment, consisting of Patton tanks, stopped the Indian advance. The Indian army made several attempts to break through the fierce Pakistani resistance. We already mentioned how at the time when it happened, the Battle of Assalutar was the biggest tank battle in the world after World War II, but the Battle of Chawinda had an even bigger tank combat. More than 160 tanks were destroyed in 4 days, with Pakistan finally emerging victorious from an armoured confrontation. They managed to stop the Indian offensive on Sialkot. At that point, the offensive potential of both sides was significantly degraded. There were several more notable battles in Dogra and Rajasthan, but after the Battle of Sialkot, it became clear that at that point the war turned into a stalemate. Both the United States and the USSR had been working hard to stop the war. On September 20th, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 211, calling on both sides to stop the fighting. On September 23, 1965, the fighting stopped. On December 10, 1966, the Indian Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri and Pakistani President Muhammad Ayub Khan met in Tashkent, USSR, signing a declaration whereby they agreed to pull back their armies to the pre-August 1965 ceasefire line. Although India had gained more ground beyond the ceasefire line and inside Pakistan, coming dangerously close to Lahore, Pakistan also captured a small amount of ground in India and beyond the ceasefire line of Kashmir. The result of the war is considered inconclusive. Although India seemed to have some advantage and carried the strategic initiative for most of the war, Towards the end, its military was somewhat exhausted too. But most importantly, it prevented Pakistan from altering the status quo in Jammu and Kashmir, which effectively meant a strategic and political failure of this war for them, as the technological advantage of Pakistan over India in terms of armoured forces and aviation did not amount to actual success on the battlefield. The war did not resolve the Kashmir conflict, as the sides started preparing for another round of hostilities. Our series on the Indo-Pakistani wars will continue in the coming months. If you don't want to miss that, subscribe and press the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.